Um, Again, a thanks to Selena, Armin, Eric, and Kitzy for joining. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. So, where to begin? I think we could start with Vision OS 26.6, which I know is top of everyone's list, but maybe we'll just move into something a little bit meatier. I think I want to start with device management. It feels like this year is truly the year of declarations, declaration all the things maybe. Um, what what's the most important takeaway, right, with all this sort of momentum that's been going on for the past couple of years for declarations in the device management stack? Um, the way we manage these devices has changed, and it's been moving and moving closer and closer to sort of pure declaration land. So, I guess the question there is, what's the big change? I'm going to just call on some folks. Armin, what do you think? What's sort of the key thing that you're thinking about in terms of declarations this year?
Well, Apple made it very clear. I mean, Cyrus wonderfully said it's now the standard. So I don't think there's much new. They've introduced new features, of course, but just if your device management service has been using declarations and moving to declarations, I guess they are just falling behind. On the other hand, I always believe that as the admin, who is the end user, declarations is something for the developer of the device management service. And while it always behooves a Mac admin to understand the tools they're using, you shouldn't care or need to care too much about that. The device management service should implement that for you in the right way. And there will be edge cases, of course, especially as new things come out where you might have to dive into the JSON and deploy stuff um, before the device management service can implement a fancy UI or even a good workflow for that. But but yeah, I mean, it's great what Apple's doing, and they are pushing this really, really fast right now. Lots of new features, which are really, really interesting, and most of the stuff they talked about is based on this. But in the end, as the admin, the less you need to care about this, the better, I think.
That's fair. That's fair. Kitsy, Armin didn't get too specific there. What stands out if we kind of look maybe purely at the device management category without getting into like the app management declaration piece, but just pure device management stack? Like what is materially new this year in the speed of with which Apple's going that's interesting?
I think the thing that's most interesting to me is Apple has deprecated managing software updates via any other method than DDM declarations. I think that's huge. I think that tells you this is exactly where Apple's going. DDM is not just the future; it is the now. It is the today. Um, yeah, I mean that says it all to me. You cannot manage software updates without DDM. So if you aren't doing DDM, you're doing it wrong. Just go back to like what is the iPhone 4? You're holding it wrong. Deep cut for people who've been around for a while.
Yeah,
But
yeah, no, good, great deep cut, great deep cut.
yeah, but yeah, I mean that's the thing to me. Like that says it all. Like it's I've always been one to kind of look at what Apple is saying without saying it, and to me that's a very big signal of like everything's going to be DDM. Um, get on board. That's all there is to say. I think.
I love the notion that Apple is saying something without saying it. I had a whole, I think I actually talked with Eric about this at some point about doing a talk called "The Future's Always Hidden in Plain Sight," which is sort of like Apple's sort of
Yeah.
art of signaling. And maybe Eric, maybe we need to still go do that at some point. I don't know. Eric, what do you think about the declaration world, the changes that are happening this year? What's interesting?
Before I answer that question, I want to address what you just said about Apple saying things and not saying things. And when I was
Yeah.
writing materials on behalf of Apple in Apple's voice, one of the things that Apple does is say what things can do. And Apple's very loath to say what things can't do. And so when Apple does break that rule or does break that convention and says, no, this will not work, kind of like imaging is not the way to go. Imaging will not work.
Imaging is dead, I believe, is what I said in 2016.
Yeah. So when Apple does say like, "Hey, this won't work," that's when I sit up and pay really close attention, because that really will not work. So back to the declarations, what's really been cool to watch has been Apple learning, Apple adding features with declarations, with DDM, and learning from their mistakes, or learning from the sharp edges and the corners that appeared once we started using it in mass. And Apple didn't say, all right, everything is switching over from MDM to DDM. But like Kitzy said, having managed OS no longer work with the legacy, not the now legacy MDM commands, starting with 27, was a huge line in the sand. And there may be things that Apple learns, like, oh, here's one condition we didn't foresee, or here's one corner case where that's not going to work, or it's not going to be good for admins or their users. But I love it when we can see Apple change technology in an eventual way. And for us as practitioners, of course, when Apple says, "Hey, this will be possible," we want that right now. We want that today. But sometimes it may take a couple of years for that to roll out, and for that to be a reality, as IDPs embrace it, as device management solutions embrace it, as third-party software vendors embrace that, and admins embrace that. So there's so many parties that need to be on the same page, that of course, it's going to take some time.
Sure. Selina, what's material to you? And I think maybe also just to follow on to the signaling of things that are not going to happen. Did you hear anything about, stern changes, stern warnings for the future that you take heed, or that people need to think about?
Yeah. I think one thing that's been really clear about not just this WWDC, but last year as well, is Apple is really they're taking the enterprise seriously, and they're taking the workflows that our mutual customers need to do in their day-to-day life. So a lot of the things that we've seen feel very material, of like, oh, this is a problem that we've been hearing about for years, and here's a solution. And is the solution perfect right out the door? Maybe not. There's always, as Arek said, there's always some edge cases and things like that. But like, one of the really nice things that came out was, being able to allow or deny, binary execution on macOS, like, huge. Or the consolidated privacy consent prompt. Like, when I heard about that, I was like, this is amazing. And I was trying to explain to my partner who was in the room with me, and he's like, why do you care about that? This doesn't seem like, I'm like, you're just a normie.
Why do you care about it, right? So I think, one of the things that was one of the most answered, like, what's interesting kind of in the poll, is this consolidated privacy consent prompt. Talk a little bit about that. Why do you get excited about that?
So we as the enterprise are looking at our devices as things that we own, organizationally owned. And one thing I really, really, really love about Apple as a consumer, and as someone who works in a business that uses Apple devices, is they balance that end user privacy, right? I don't have to really be worried about anybody secretly taking screenshots of what I'm doing at work or things like that, because Apple takes user privacy and informed consent very seriously. But sometimes there are applications that just need to have a lot of permissions, and you either have end users, you get pops up, a ton of pop-ups throughout the life of, like, oh, I need this and this and this. And you risk the end user accidentally hitting something like, no, I don't want to allow that, or accepting some and not the other, or just fatigue, closing out and being like, I don't want to worry about that. So being able to have a consolidated place of, this is everything our organization is requiring, and giving some information about it, is a nice balance between organizations that need to have their end user devices with these permissions, and the end user still having informed consent. I think it's a nice solution. I'm looking forward to seeing people use it in the 27 cycle. But yeah, super exciting about it, and it's just one of these pain points that doesn't seem like a really large pain point until you are trying to manage devices and end users and or you're in that situation of, oh, you didn't press the prompt. Now I have to explain to you how to go into the settings app and, and fix it. Just simple, easy, and elegant, which, we come to expect from Apple.
Do you think sort of experientially for the end users that are trying to architect something, does that mean that I think there's sort of this dreaded thing when you're setting up a new system where you start doing your work, you join a Zoom meeting, you join a Teams meeting or something like that, and then you don't have the entitlements to use the camera or use the microphone or things like that. Is that going to make some of those experiences easier, or is it still going to have some of those personal entitlements only that can't be set at the organizational level? I don't know that I fully understand the breadth and boundary. And that's a sort of an open question for everyone. Like, how much can you pre-approve? Because it is a fine line from a security and privacy standpoint.
Can't pre-approve any of it, right? You have to wait until the user opens Zoom, and then you can show the consolidated prompt. And at least with the builds of 27 that we have and what we've seen from Apple about 27 is that includes microphone and camera, but it doesn't include screen recording. So I can't wait. That's it. Like, again, it's going to take a while to get there, but I can foresee a time when there will be a way to say, all right, so here's everything that you need to successfully participate in a teleconference app. Do the thing, allow the thing. I
Right.
just open the app. Let me do it. And I know there's definitely organizations who, as part of their onboarding, they've figured out clever ways to trigger those prompts for all of the corporate apps that they're going to need, so that, all right, during your onboarding day, you're going to do your Zoom, you're going to do your WebEx, all the different things that you might ever need to communicate with. Just get that over with, rip that bandage off.
Makes sense. The other sort of related topic, right? We've talked a little bit about the app experience by way of the privacy consent prompts. Pretty big changes at the intersection of app deployment and declarations. That kind of came in a couple of different flavors. But Kitzy, thoughts on app deployment, managed app in the declarative protocol? What's sort of your read on are we there? Do we have everything we need in app deployment land to not think about the maybe historic install application back and forth flow from a device management service standpoint?
I mean, I don't think we'll know until we start really doing it, right? Like like Eric said earlier, you never really know where the corners and the sharp edges are until until we start using it in production. I'm probably not the best person to answer this one, because this is probably the one I've spent the least amount of time looking into right now. So I'm actually just going to kind of open this up to anybody else who wants to jump in on this one, because I don't think I can speak authoritatively on this.
Fair. Armin, have you poked at it at all? Whether it's the app management pieces of macOS 27?
I mean, I have looked at the frameworks. I do think these functionalities have been on iOS for a year or more already and available. So they're not new. And I know that some solutions are already implementing it on iOS. So that should make the adoption for macOS at least more accessible for the developers, which I'm looking forward to. I mean, the app deployment through the declarative channel, I think that's going to be a win for everybody, because the status updates, this way, the status channel and the dynamic nature of DDM will just show its strengths. Like we had it in software update, and now we're getting it for app deployment, whether it's custom apps or Mac App Store apps or something else. I think that's going to be just a great win. We will have to give the developers time to implement these things in a good way, but I think overall that's an easy thing. The more intriguing and I think very powerful thing is the managed app framework, or the declarative way of pushing down settings, that is also a bit mysterious and harder to grasp, because Apple is placing it as a replacement for both configuration profiles in the user default system or app config on the iOS side. It is super powerful. We can push down secrets and certificates in a way that is secure and the end user, even if they're an admin, can't really access. That's just amazing, and we've been clamoring for that for a long time. But this has to be implemented by the app developer, and very few app developers in my mind have the capacity and the focus on the Mac platform to implement something that is so specific to the Mac platform. So that will be an interesting balance to see. I think for security tools and other things, this is the way to push down configuration and secrets and all of these things. But to get the various developers who are necessarily companies who focus on the Mac as a platform, to see this and to have the infrastructure to build and test this, that's going to be a great challenge for Apple and for us as device management vendors to convince them as well.
Yeah, for app developers to implement a framework that's not really being used and relied upon, that's a big ask, right? Like, okay, we're going to do all this stuff, but it's not really ready. It's not being used. The current way of package management just works fine enough. But how shocked were you to see the ability to remove the contents of a package? That was, I really didn't expect that for this WWDC.
So pick on that one a little bit more, Eric, so folks understand what you're talking about. Like, I think we're going to maybe have to just make sure we cover a little bit of a snippet of like, what is the feature, right? So if this is people's lazy way of getting through the what's new documents that Apple provide, I do recommend everyone go read them, but like, maybe the 20-second on it.
Yeah, so if you use device management solution to push down a package, when you remove its configuration, macOS will remove the things that the package installed. So like thinking way back to the days of using Jamf Composer to package up a package so that you can uninstall it. Wow.
It's like taking a snapshot of the install.
Oh,
Sorry. All right. Sorry.
That's next year. That's
next year. Okay. Yeah, we don't talk about future products and services. That's right. I forgot. Okay. Armin said something interesting about. So Eric, I'm equally surprised. I agree. It's definitely a big change. The other thing that Armin said that feel free to jump in, Kitzy, and circle back if you want. I think Appatest is a little bit out of left field, right? It's not super down the middle of like maybe what we usually think about in the device management sphere, but it's a huge security change. Does anyone want to take a swing at explaining it? Because if I do it, it may be really, really bad. Anyone? Kitzy? Yes? No? It's okay. No
Yeah,
pressure.
I don't think this is a good one for me either.
Okay, that's all right. But like I think the read on Appatest is to sort of remove fraud as a fake app as a possible vector into your cloud service or your service. So using the secure enclave to attest that the app is what it says it is and it hasn't been modified and tampered with and things like that. So I think that's really interesting because it feels like a brand new thing. It's very, very early. And like, what does it mean for an enterprise app deployment, management, or measuring the attestation across your fleet of apps? Like all these things, you can imagine where you could take these things and join them together. But I just think, it's definitely a signal in my mind that, attestation has been a theme over the past couple of years to make sure that the device is what it says it is. And now we're going further down into the individual application layer to talk about that.
Yeah, I love it because the device, we want to make sure that the device is accessing data. Now we get further. We want to make sure that the app that is accessing the sensitive data is what it says it is. So super, super cool continuation of that attestation.
Yep. Another really sort of in the vein of apps, we've kind of, deviated a little bit, away from just pure declarations into apps land. There's a new allow or deny binary execution change. It's a really, really big change. Open forum. Who wants to kind of talk through a little bit about what does that mean for the platform? It's a big change on macOS.
I'm personally really excited about this one. A lot of the customers I work with are deploying Santa for doing this now. And that's, Santa's great. It's a fantastic tool. It's a, level of complexity and overhead that some teams just aren't ready to take on. And being able to do this natively in the platform is going to be a game changer, I think.
Selena, thoughts?
Yeah, same. We also have a lot of customers using Santa, which also agree is an excellent tool. I'm kind of curious to see how folks are doing this, maybe as a first step. Something with this is, and something that I always kind of try to keep in mind is when we're talking about things that are available in the new OS, you still need to bridge that gap in your environments, because a lot of folks won't immediately go to 27, or they'll have devices on older OS is still lingering around. I know I recently talked to somebody who had some shockingly old devices still
Intel.
floating in there. Is some Intel.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another huge thing that I don't think we
yeah.
touched on is no support for Intel. And they had warned us last year, but if you do have Intel devices floating around in your fleets, they're not going to be able to get a lot of these new features. They're not going to be able to go to 27 just at all. So maybe it's time to look at your hardware strategies and see what can be replaced, what needs to be replaced. But what's really cool about this is it's a first step where people are able to manage and deny things. Not everything can be denied, certain accessibility options and things like that. Apple's not letting you shoot yourself in the foot, which I think is a very nice safeguard. But it'll be curious to see where people start deploying this and keeping on top of it. When you're using a platform like Santa, they're doing a lot of the heavy lifting for you and keeping things updated. Being able to do it yourself is excellent. And I'm looking forward to how folks are using it in their platform. I don't know, Armin and Eric, do you have any excitements about it?
Yeah, I mean, the Eru agent, when we use app blocking, we use the Endpoint Security Framework, or ESF, to block apps, app binaries. So it's great to see Apple using ESF to block binaries as well. So it's the way to go. I mean, there's no question about it.
I mean, the restrictions option in the MDM profile has been around. Actually, that has been around since MCX, since it wasn't even a profile. And it still works in macOS 26, at least as well as it has ever worked. It's fairly
I
easy
didn't
to
have
bypass if you
MCX
know
on
what you
my
do.
panelist
Yeah.
bingo card.
Yeah. And we need bingo cards for sure the next time we do this. But Armin, continue.
Yeah, so I'm glad that finally there is Apple has the step forward. It's been deprecated for a while. It's been hanging around. There wasn't an official way forward from Apple. They always said use the endpoint security framework, but especially for like education, they're often pressed for adding yet another license or adding something with the complexity of Santa, as powerful as it is. This, I hope, we'll have to see how it works in detail, but I hope this is at least a basic fundamental functionality that can cover most needs. And then if you have more complex needs there, then you will upgrade to security tools or Santa, which is really great. And I don't think that will replace Santa, the need for Santa, but it will provide the good enough for most people.
All right. So
one thing I want to call out real quick is just to touch on what Selena said about bridging that gap between devices running older OSs versus the features in the new ones, is that can become a good forcing function within your organization to get devices updated to the latest version of, especially when it's something security related, to be able to make the case of, for security reasons, we have to get everyone to this minimum OS version now. Sometimes it takes something like that to make that actually happen. So, just think about that in your own organizations as you're talking about your update strategy.
Great point, Kitzy. And like to one example of that would be the configuration profile for blocking USB and external volumes. Like it was deprecated for a while, and then Apple brought it back for a specific version of macOS. So if you have really older versions of macOS, that configuration profile didn't work, that's an example of something like, okay, well, in order to use this free way of keeping users from attaching a jump drive for data exfiltration, we need to at least get to this particular version of macOS.
All right. Love it. So
Before
we've
we get off of
covered,
apps, I just want to make sure that, someone says
yeah.
something about Apple Creator Studio. I don't know what to say about it, but that was weird, wasn't it? How Apple's just like, hey, here's this thing. It's new apps that are available. It's got the same name, but it's a different bundle ID, or it's the same bundle ID. And it kind of felt like they, if everything had fallen into place a little bit differently, that could have happened after the announcement of some of the new things that you can do with apps and declarations and subscriptions.
The subscriptions.
Yeah, the subscriptions, super, super excited about. Maybe you were going to say that, but I just wanted to get that out there. That's it.
Well, this entire conversation is just kinetic energy. So I think we should talk about the subscriptions change, right? The apps and books service, the artist formerly known as VPP, hasn't seen a huge number of sort of feature changes, but one of the biggest ones I can think of over the long arc of my time kind of in this ecosystem is we want to be able to handle subscriptions for organizations. So who wants to kind of talk about like maybe the announcement? Because I think in some ways it's probably more than we expected.
It took me by surprise. I think of everything at WWDC, that was the one where I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Losing my mind. Yeah, exactly what Arek said. And again, my partner was like, what are you talking about?
Why are you excited about this?
So Apple introduced declarative apps quite a while ago. For iOS, I think it was 17. They did it. So it's been around for a bit, and they've been adding to it every year, and it's been awesome because as anyone who has worked with the MDM apps and books, there's certain pain points about things like triggering the update of the apps, or and that perfect timeline of you have to time the MDM command and the device has to be unlocked and the app can't be opened. Just a lot of these friction points with the old way of doing things. And Apple has been adding to declarative to be able to just turn on automatic updates where the device can do it itself when it, smartly, like it does on your consumer devices, and things like that. And the last one that was missing was being able to do in-app purchases or subscriptions. And in this change, you still can't do a one-time in-app purchase. This does apply just to subscriptions. There's a new API in addition to the API that exists for doing the licensing for it. There are some caveats with it that, as I've been diving into it a little bit, is you can deploy the application via device-based volume purchasing. So you can assign the license to the device to get the app there, but the subscription does need to be assigned to a user. And the way to do that, you have to have the user-based, you have to invite the user if you haven't gone through that workflow before. And Apple has made that workflow better with managed Apple accounts. They automatically accept the invite. So there is some nuances there as it goes out. And for folks who are not using managed Apple accounts, for their end users, this might be the thing that I highly consider doing and making that push into federating and doing the domain reclamation or whatever you need to do wherever you are in that journey, because subscriptions is huge, and it does need to be assigned to a user. And if you're ever doing user anything licensing, just make your life easier. Use a managed Apple account. Just don't do it with the personal Apple ID. Like, please. Armin,
sure.
I saw you unmuted.
I do want to pick up on what Arek said, is that the release of the studio package just seemed like it was too early, and the infrastructure to actually support it in a managed environment wasn't quite in place yet. And now we are getting the subscription API. Well, we will get it in September, October, right, for the
Coming
machines
soon.
that have upgraded. But still, we are seeing that and I do hope that, because other things like the bundle identifier for the apps changed on the Mac, because the App Store doesn't really allow you to reuse or repurpose bundle identifiers, and you have to switch them under certain circumstances. And we get the weird app names that look differently in terminal than they do in the Finder, and all of these things. And these are all limitations that are actually imposed by the App Store. And I wonder, and this is pure speculation, if this pain that Apple had to go through, the team who does the Creative Studio, if that will lead to more additions to management and changes in the App Store that will benefit us as admins, but also developers who go through these pain points when they publish apps or want to merge apps into a bundle or something like that.
But it was that whole event was just another reminder that Apple is not primarily an enterprise and education company.
Yes.
And we're here, our world is enterprise and education. And when something that Apple does that doesn't meet our needs and our customers' needs, we're like, what? How could this possibly happen? Because, that's our viewpoint. But there's a lot of consumers, way more than what we're focused on.
Eric, I want to just steal an idea from you there, and just this comes from maybe some of my career history. Whenever you can make a problem a consumer problem, but an enterprise or education problem that is also a consumer problem, you get much bigger lever. So I think for those of us that are, we'll get to this maybe towards the end as we think about writing feedback and giving feedback, living on these products. I think to the extent that you can, sure, frame it in your world, your use case, the really specific thing that you're feeling, that's super important. But also, if you can find the context to make it a much larger problem than it is for everyone in the entire install base, that always helps, right? So, great example in my mind is like, we wanted to erase all content and settings in macOS for a long time, and there was a lot of steps, right, to getting there. And like like in our world, erase all content and settings is like, of course, why wouldn't we do that? But if you also kind of think about like, for the US folks out there, like the Craigslist market, the secondary Mac market, like how do you get devices securely sold off? Like it's actually a really big consumer problem too. So like, anytime you can find an enterprise problem and make a consumer problem, better leverage, better legs.
All right. So one of the things that didn't come out from this WWDC is a solution to the problem of I have an iPad in kiosk mode. It's locked to single app, and that app has an update. But how does the update happen? How do I coordinate unlocking removing the single app, installing the update, making sure the update's installed, and then reapplying? Like that's not a consumer problem. That's
right. Right. It's a museum and special education type of problem. Yeah, for sure.
And there's a lot of retail iPad out there that is running in single app mode. There's a ton of devices that this affects. This is a huge problem, but it doesn't rise to WWDC 2026.
But right, big changes in parental controls. So maybe the guided access, maybe the parental controls changes are going to get just I'm a little optimistic. All right, we'll move on. I want to talk about identity, right? We talked about apps, we talked about that device management stack. This is not my area of expertise, but I'm going to ask the question: is it finally the year of platform SSO being the usable, lovable thing that we want? There's still holes. I don't know. It's fine for me, but I'm not. I'm an easy use case. So what are folks' thoughts on identity land, especially platform SSO?
I don't know if it's there, but it's so much closer. Then yeah. I'll be quiet.
It's closer now than it's ever been.
Sounds like we're trending in the right directory. All right, more. Let's go.
I think my answer to your question is I hope so. Again, I have some customers that are adopting it with open arms and are very excited about it. I have some customers that don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. I think both have valid reasons for being on the side of the fence that they're on. But yeah, I mean, we're definitely stepping in the right direction. It's very exciting to see that continue to grow in a way that makes it more usable and more accessible for more organizations.
I think something people have to keep in mind is when we're talking about platform SSO is there's a balance between Apple providing the tools, the device management services, creating, implementing those tools, and then working with the third-party identity providers. So like Okta and Entra have done a great job in supporting it. Google absent notably. For folks who are have Google as their IDP, we're just kind of left in this lurch of, come on Google, file the feedbacks. Please support it, because it is one of these. It's awesome. Apple creates these, and they are listening to feedbacks. I think that's, again, very clear from the new. They've understood some of these edge cases, and it is getting us closer and closer. I'm sure new edge cases are going to come up, new feedbacks, but it also requires the IDP to do it. So for anyone who's frustrated by it, and I've noticed this over the last few years of, Apple said it works. Let's do it at WWDC. Understand that there's a lot behind of, they announced it. Now Entra and Okta are gonna very dutifully do the things that they need to do, and the device management services are going to do the things we need to do to make it a reality in your workflows. So and for anyone who's using Google or any other IDP that doesn't support it, please continue to hassle them. I know we are, as a Google workshop.
There's a poll that the participants see on screen, and the idea behind the poll is, with Platform SSO and the secure enclave authentication method, we're now seeing the ability for organizations to allow their users to have a PIN to log into their Mac, just like they have a PIN to unlock their iPhone. And you don't have to have a PIN. Users could use the exact same password they've been using. But now with that secure enclave method, does not specifically does not do anything to sync your IDP password with your Mac local password, with the idea that you don't want your IDP password, you don't want your user to ever enter that like on a fake website, or you don't want them to get phished. So when we all talk to organizations about this possibility, sometimes, especially like 3 years ago, when I was in those conversations, people were like, absolutely not, never, that's never going to happen. We always need a super secure password that you enter in a keyboard. But lately, when I've been talking to people, this seemed much more open much more open to the idea. But the two pieces that, in addition to all the technology, the two pieces that need to be in place is the organization leadership needs to be on board, and the users need to be psychologically ready to sign into their Mac or log into their Mac with a PIN instead of the long password that they may have for their IDP. So I encourage you to take that poll.
I do think it's interesting to note that 64% of our participants have selected either not yet or not going to happen here ever. I think it shows that at least the community as a whole feels like there's a long way to go before that's something that they're ready to consider. Although the next likely one is absolutely. So it seems like there's not a lot in the middle. There's the divide's pretty stark there.
Yeah. And we're seeing that, we saw very similar stuff with AI in the Jason Snell's 6 Colors Enterprise survey, that last year, the year before, the sentiment about AI was like, no, that's not useful. And this year, a lot more people feel like they're getting use out of it, and it's providing use and utility in their organization.
I think for folks who are early adopters and using this in their organization or testing it, please start a blog. Go to the conferences, go to your meetups, because the one thing,
start
a blog.
Everyone's no big deal. Everyone's doing it.
A YouTube channel, maybe, I don't know, whatever. TikTok, I'm not on TikTok, but if you were going to talk about your experience of Platform SSO in your environment, maybe that'll be the thing that gets me to download because there's a lot of questions and a lot of hesitancy here, and having valuable real world experiences with it. It's one thing for me as a vendor to say it's great. It means a lot more coming from you folks in the community. So, and it is something I want to know about it, even if I'm your only subscriber. I suspect I won't be, but please, publish your experiments, because it is valuable, and I'm super interested. I don't know if anyone else on this call is. Everyone's nodding their head. So
Absolutely, yeah.
And
You've
shout
got
out
4.
to all the people in the Platform SSO channel on Mac Admin Slack who are sharing their experiences and making it easier for everyone.
If you're not in that channel and you're curious about this, especially if you're in the in-between or the not yet and you want to see folks, great channel to join and lurk in.
I do think on macOS especially, we have a lot of tradition to overcome because, I mean, the Macs used to be network connected and we had Active Directory binding. And yes, you used the same password everywhere. That's what single sign-on used to mean, right? It was Kerberos and all that stuff, showing my age here.
Yeah.
But
First MCX,
imagine,
then Kerberos.
yes, right.
Someone
And
mute him.
Flashbacks.
And we have to overcome that on the Mac more than on iOS because iPhones could never be bound to Active Directory, right? And you always had the separate PIN, and first it was 4 digits, now it's 6 or 8, and people are starting to think about alphanumeric stuff on the iPhone for security. And yeah, we have to overcome this tradition and this mindset that the Mac is different and somehow they're not network connected or they're not connected to the corporate network anymore. We are getting over that at different speeds anyway. So the password is just another thing we have to overcome. This is not.
Well,
This is
remember
not.
when Apple dipped its toe into user enrollment with iOS and iPadOS, and you could you couldn't change the passcode policy. You couldn't require more than like a 6-digit PIN, and people were up in arms. People were like, "Oh my gosh! Like if I'm in a bank, of course I'm going to need more than 6-digit PIN," and that was a big blocker. That's another example of Apple starting small, learning and iterating and it getting bigger and bigger. So I just want to call back to that. But I think people are a lot more okay now with a 6-digit PIN for iPhone unlock than they were 5 years ago. So it's really interesting to see our attitudes as practitioners, customers' attitudes, leadership's attitudes, user attitudes. We're all getting dragged, kicking and screaming by the forces that be.
It is encouraging to see the stuff that Apple is adding, the features that Apple is adding to Platform SSO in macOS 27, and in some ways in iOS 27, iPadOS 27. I have to be careful here. It's encouraging. Like they're listening to feedback. It might not be everything we wish for, but yes, this is definite progress. And yeah.
What year will we no longer need a password to log into a Mac?
Well, it is based on 50-year-old Unix, right?
I mean, technically, you don't today. I mean, I use my fingerprint to log into my Mac most of the time. So
After restart.
Yeah, the file vault.
Sure, yeah, after restart. Yeah. But I mean, at what point are you defining like not needing a password? Like, how does that? Like, where does that definition land for you?
Well, it's a good question. I think it's interesting to look at the Touch ID for Platform SSO because one of the keys is require Touch ID or watch. Maybe if you had require Touch ID and watch, right? Maybe that's enough, right? I don't know if I can figure out enough of the boundary to where you can be like, yeah, sure, you can start up that computer and open it up because you have enough of the
watch, because I think that was a nod to the MacBook Neo without Touch ID.
Fair.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Well, it's not just the MacBook Neo, the Mac Mini and Mac Studio, and the iMac can come without Touch ID as well.
Yeah.
So they don't necessarily have Touch ID keyboards, right?
Yeah. But my understanding is you still need a password. So it's password plus biometric authentication.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. So we've got. I'm sorry. Go on, Armin. We'll pause after that. Go on.
Yeah, but even when you don't need a local password to unlock your account and to unlock File Vault, you will still have a recovery key that's either stored in the management service or the iCloud for consumer devices, I assume, and that's a password, right? So
Yeah, but iOS, iPadOS don't have file vault. Like they don't have a
yeah,
file vault recovery key. So I think that the engineers at Apple are like trying to figure out like how can we make the Mac even more like iOS and iPadOS and not have this password challenge and the file vault recovery key challenge. And I mean, of course, they're radically different platforms, and macOS has this long history, long baggage with it. But we've seen Apple make radical changes, like with APFS. Like that was a radical change. And just want to call out David, you were talking about how we wanted to erase all contents and settings, and how when APFS first came out, and I learned like, oh, there's a separate user volume from system volume. I'm like, I'm going to be clever and boot into what I don't know what it was called then, but it's macOS Recovery or Recovery OS, and I deleted the user partition and I restarted, and like maybe it'll regenerate, and it did not.
It did
I
not.
was too early.
And
Yeah, it's right. They're heading the right place though.
this problem is one that the consumers have, like, to call back on what you said earlier, David, make this a consumer problem, not just an enterprise problem. And in this case, I think Apple is going in the way of the consumers. They're thinking about that first, with the enterprises being like, oh no, overcoming that tradition that Armin mentioned, and the hesitancy, and as Kitzy mentioned in the poll too, we're kind of seeing that divide between yes, let's do it now, to absolutely never going to happen. And I think Eric's right. I'm curious to see how this changes in the next few years, and I'm wondering if some of those changes is going to come from a consumer experience, as folks start doing it. I always, when I think about Apple devices, I think about my 92-year-old grandmother and my mom, who are not tech literate, and the amount of times they call me, because we're all default Apple support, right, for our
Yep.
families. And if those folks can use their devices with just their fingerprint or an Apple Watch, my grandparents have Apple Watches, then great. It solves a problem for them, because the amount of times my grandma's forgotten her password. And then, we have to go through, at this point, I actually just enrolled their devices so I could have the recovery key, because it's become such a problem. So, file feedback for anyone who's on this call that has strong opinions too on what you would like to see in your environment.
That's great. So feedback's come up a bunch of times. I think we have about 10 minutes left. I want to make sure that we spend a little bit of time talking about feedback. This is a really critical time of the year for us, I think, professionally working on products and the ecosystem, but I think it's also obviously a really important time for the admins that are thinking about how to manage this transition, because there's always some sort of inevitable transition. So I want to spend a few minutes. What sort of advice in providing feedback and testing would you give to the audience? I'll start with Armin, if you don't mind.
Well, test early and often. I mean, it's always a balance. We talked just before we went online. We all talked about, have you deployed the beta on your production device yet? And some of us have, and some of us are blocked by apps that really don't work, that are critical. But that's why you test, right? Don't test in production. Test with a blank machine first, and then grow more and more complex. Provide feedback to Apple and to your management service and any third-party software that may be involved. Don't be afraid to open multiple tickets, right? There will be finger pointing, but also most of us work together behind the scenes. So open multiple tickets and share the ticket numbers and everything. That might help the person who is handling the ticket at your management service or at the third-party vendor. It might.
Great. Kitzy?
Yeah, I mean, testing is so important, especially with a release like this where so many things are changing. I don't recommend testing on your production device for obvious reasons. I have a dedicated test device that I use that I've upgraded to the latest beta, and testing things and figuring out what breaks. And I'm filing, lots of feedback with both Apple and with my. Oh, I have a list of things I'm going to be submitting to my employer's product team as well, of things that don't work, things that could work better, things that need to be different. And I think it's super important to get that beta going on a test device and file that feedback early and often for both Apple and your MDM vendor, for sure.
I'm going to pause before I go to Eric and Selina, but like we're looking at the results of the feedback, and I think I have a homework assignment for everyone. About 50% of the respondents in the survey just sort of responded feedback question mark, right? And I was great to see 2, 3, 4, 5 folks that the people that have already filed multiple for Golden Gate, but this is as good of a year as any to just get familiar with the feedback system and submit your first one. Your feedback counts. I know it sometimes feels like dropping an idea in a box that no one's going to read, and I can assure you that that is not the case. Eric, Selina, anything to add?
Yeah, unless when you're filling out your feedback and it asks what does this pertain to, if you say none of these items, then that's the black hole. So never, ever, ever choose
other.
Doesn't pertain to anything in this list.
Huh.
We're all device management experts, so if you have to pick something and nothing else matches, pick device management, and then that'll change the follow-up questions. But at least that makes sure that your feedback gets to the teams that are enterprise and education and do stuff that we're looking into it and investigating. But the other thing, and maybe Selina was going to say it, but the earlier you can get your feedback in, the more time Apple has to actually address it. So it's tempting to wait to test until closer to the northern hemisphere autumn, closer to the release, so that you won't run into as many bugs. But the sooner that you can find the bugs and share them with Apple, the more time, the more runway you give Apple.
Yeah. And if you're not part of the Appleseed for IT program here, please join it. And if you have joined it, go to the Mac Admin Slack, go to the Appleseed public channel and see the pinned post and how to get into our secret channel. And there's a whole source of information in there. If maybe you don't have the time to test, which is totally valid. We're all very busy. I'm a rascal and I am running the beta in my production machine. I do this fully aware that I may need to wipe my machine or spin up another machine to use if it breaks. So if you are one of those folks, I saw in the last poll there were some who were like me, be comfortable in wiping your machine and understanding the data loss there. But as you're filing these feedbacks, please give as much information about why. It's your use case, why this may be a blocker for you in deploying 27. I know there's been some about certain user channel only declarations and why that could be problematic. But speaking from a product manager, point of view, the things that help me the most in identifying feature requests and prioritizing them is understanding your workflow. What are you trying to accomplish? What do you want to do? And what is your ideal outcome is also helpful. Apple may not do exactly your ideal outcome, but explaining to them how you would expect this to work helps a lot as they take in that information. So as much information as you can give, screenshots, real world examples, if you can tie it to the consumer problems too, even better. But I don't think anyone at Apple is going to complain if you have small novellas as your feedbacks. The more information, the better.
Because no one's in your head. It's so easy as we're banging our head against this stuff that be like, well, of course it's obvious that you'd want to do X, Y, and Z, but you have to make that explicit, right? Mm-hmm. Because the engineer that this gets punted to might not have any idea, like, well, how is this actually used in the real world? So being explicit about like what you just said, just super, super helpful.
All right, I'm going to wrap up with one last question, and we covered a lot of ground. But it's Kitzy called us out when we were kind of thinking about this whole thing, and it's too big to ignore. In all of the things for what's new in education enterprise, there's not a ton of talk about AI, but the centerpiece of the entire keynote and Apple Platform State of the Union was around applying AI in different contexts around the Apple platform. And so, Kitzy, I think what I want to do is we've got maybe a minute here. We're not going to be able to unpack everything AI. This is not the point of the conversation today, but I think maybe I want to go around the horn, and I kind of want to have 30 seconds. What does it mean, right, for what's going on with Apple and AI in our world? So, Kitzy, kick us off.
I think anyone who follows me on LinkedIn or has read my blog knows that I have a ton of stuff to say about AI, and I have a ton of stuff more to say about AI than I've said already. But I think for me, the biggest thing here is I'm always looking for signals, right? And Apple dedicated so much time in the keynote to AI and how they're implementing it on devices and how they're going to be using it, how end users are going to be using it. And I think that's a very big signal that, again, I feel like I'm kind of saying the same thing over and over again, but AI is happening, it's coming, and I still see so many people in this community just simply refusing to engage with AI tools. And no, they're not perfect and they can't do everything. But I think it's important to understand how they work and know what they do well and what they don't do well, and be involved in the conversations around them and be involved in the decisions being made around them, because it's clearly happening and it's not going to not happen. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's a thing. So that's the soapbox I'll be on today.
That's fair. Arek?
I love seeing that Apple is doubling down on privacy and security when they've gotten tremendous pressure from the outside to do AI, to bring value with AI, and Apple's like, no, we're going to do it in a way that preserves security and privacy. Really appreciate that.
Armin?
I do think, to bring this to the management perspective back, right? There's a running joke that Apple introduces new features, and as admins, we're first interested in how can I turn that off. But
Always.
Rather than turning it off generically, especially now as the prices are rising and everything, it's more of you need tools to control it and restrict it and make sure that people are using the tools you want, and not running off to the latest, most expensive thing on the drop of a hat. And these tools are out there. I was surprised myself that there are controls that I can deploy for the so-called harnesses for the agents and the tools that you can deploy. And that is something for Mac admins or admins in general that we need to get familiar with and need to learn how to deploy and control, because aside from the fact that, yes, it is there, we have to face it, we have to work with it, we also have to learn how to manage it, and that is a different set of challenges.
Selina, you're obviously going to start another blog to support this, but what else do you have to say on the matter? And then we can wrap up.
I think there are a lot of AI blogs out there and not enough platform SSO blogs out there. But
all right, how about an AI TikTok / Twitch, one or the other? I don't know.
I am somebody who's kind of come a long way in AI. I'm one of these people that Arek mentioned earlier in how the attitudes have changed over the last few years. I'm still skeptical of it, but something I appreciated as a consumer in this WWDC when Apple talked about AI is they presented real world problems of hey, this is actually a problem I have. Shortcuts is the one that I think of. I love shortcuts. My brain does not function the way shortcuts works. So I think AI, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on where you are, is a reality for a lot of us that we can't avoid. But being a human using it and understanding when is the right time to use it and when is it just being lazy. It's at what point, what's the cost here? What are we gaining when you're using AI? And sometimes there's a lot, and there are real world problems that I use it weekly, at least, sometimes daily. But it's intentional. And I really appreciate, like Arek said, to Apple's focus on privacy and security. It's not going into something that's going to be used. My data is going to be used to train, the private compute and the local processing is there. And that makes me feel a little bit better about it than using some of the other companies that exist out there.
Awesome. All right. On that note, we are couple minutes over. I want to thank all of you again. This was a ton of fun. I learned a lot. I hope the audience learned a lot. I hope we get to do this again sometime soon. Looking forward to everyone's new blog, new Twitch, new TikToks, new social media. It's going to be fantastic. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much,
See you
everyone.
later.
It's
Thanks
great
for
to see
Thanks for
you.
having me.
you.